The story begins with a man named Jae-hyuk. He is the main character in this film and is a former exceptional pilot. Jae-hyuk is traveling to Hawaii to seek treatment for his daughter Sumin, who suffers from a rare condition, a skin disease that causes redness and itching. At that moment, Sumin suddenly wants to go to the restroom on her own because she doesn't want to bother her father, who has been waiting in line to purchase plane tickets for quite some time. When Sumin goes to check, she finds that the women's restroom is full, so she decides to go to the men's restroom instead. Meanwhile, we are introduced to a man named Ryu Jin-seok. He is a mad doctor with a dark, malicious plan. We see him cutting his armpit open and inserting a capsule containing a deadly virus into the wound, trying to bypass the airport's security screening systems. However, he realizes that someone is watching him from a restroom stall. When he checks the stall, it turns out that Sumin is inside. Just as Ryu is about to act, Jae-hyuk walks into the restroom, breaking the tension. As Jae-hyuk prepares to board the plane, Ryu approaches him. Ryu asks a series of intrusive questions, where Jae-hyuk is going, where he works, and whether he has a wife. Questions that obviously irritate Jae-hyuk. Eventually, Ryu sees Jae-hyuk's luggage and finds out that Jae-hyuk is headed to Hawaii. This prompts Ryu to buy a ticket for the same flight. On the plane, Jae-hyuk boards with his daughter Sumin, and they take their seats. Little do they know that Ryu is on the same flight. The pilots prepare for takeoff. The flight attendants begin serving the passengers, and the engines roar to life. Among the passengers, we see a variety of people, some traveling for vacation, some to visit family, and others seeking medical treatment. None of them suspect the disaster that is about to unfold. At the same time, we are introduced to Detective In-ho, who is investigating a threat against the flight. A mysterious person has made threats about crashing the plane headed to Hawaii. Detective In-ho becomes personally involved, as his wife is on that very flight. He begins to dig deeper into the case and soon receives information from local informants who claim that the man behind the threats is none other than Ryu, who lives near their apartment complex. Detective In-ho rushes to Ryu's apartment, where he is greeted by a foul odor. He breaks in and discovers a corpse. Inside the apartment, police find video footage of a man creating a virus and testing it on rats. It is later confirmed that the dead person died from the virus. Meanwhile, on the plane, Ryu retrieves the virus capsule from his armpit and sprays the virus inside the airplane's bathroom. Sumin, unaware, is about to enter the bathroom, but fortunately someone else steps in before her, saving her from exposure. Ryu then whispers to Sumin that everyone on the plane is going to die. Inside the bathroom, the man who entered is unknowingly exposed to the virus and begins to feel ill. He reports the strange symptoms to a flight attendant. The flight attendant checks the bathroom, and in the process, she accidentally inhales the virus particles, infecting herself. Jae-hyuk happens to glance at a video playing on the phone of the passenger seated next to him. The video shows a man making ominous threats, and Jae-hyuk quickly realizes that the man in the video is none other than Ryu. He immediately reports this to the flight attendant, while Sumin tells her what Ryu had whispered to her about everyone dying. The flight attendant asks Ryu for his identification and learns that he is a doctor. On the ground, Detective In-ho contacts the airline, urging them to have the plane returned to Korea because there's a terrorist on board. However, the airline officials dismiss the detective's concerns. Back on the plane, it's time for lunch, and the flight attendants begin serving meals to the passengers and the pilots. Unfortunately, the meat prepared for the co-pilot has been contaminated by the virus due to the proximity of the kitchen to the infected bathroom. However, the pilot decides to take the co-pilot's meal, and the co-pilot agrees to switch. Shortly after, the man exposed to the virus in the bathroom begins to exhibit severe symptoms, including nosebleeds and bleeding from his eyes. He stumbles through the cabin, seeking help, but the other passengers avoid him in fear. He collapses, vomiting blood, and a doctor on board rushes to examine him. However, the man dies shortly after. The captain receives a message from the flight attendants warning of a terrorist on board. The co-pilot goes to investigate, while Jae-hyuk confronts Ryu, demanding to see what he's hiding under his arm. When Ryu is asked for his ID again, he panics and tries to escape, but the passengers manage to restrain him. In his last act of desperation, Ryu spreads the virus further inside the cabin. After Ryu is restrained, Jae-hyuk speaks with the co-pilot, who turns out to be an old friend, though the relationship is strained due to a past incident. The co-pilot radios headquarters, confirming the presence of a virus on the plane, and several passengers begin showing symptoms. Meanwhile, back at the airport, the Minister of Transportation is holding a crisis meeting about the virus, confirming that it is deadlier than the COVID-19 virus. The symptoms of infection include coughing, fever, ruptured blood vessels, and blistering skin. They also find out that Ryu used to work at a pharmaceutical company called Bricom. Detective In-ho suggests negotiating with Ryu to prevent further chaos, but during the negotiation, Ryu expresses his desire for everyone on the plane to die alongside him. He even seems to take pleasure in watching people die, just as he had done in his experiments on lab rats. At one point, Ryu spits in the co-pilot's face. Suddenly, the pilot who had eaten the contaminated meat dies, causing the plane to lose control. The plane begins to descend rapidly, throwing everyone into a panic. Jae-hyuk rushes to the cockpit and takes control of the plane, managing to stabilize it. However, Ryu succumbs to his own virus and dies. News of the virus outbreak aboard the plane spreads throughout Korea, causing widespread panic. Concerned citizens worry about their family members on board, and the government confirms the news of the virus. The Minister of Transportation flies to Hawaii to handle the situation, as the Korean citizens on board are expected to land there. On the plane, the flight attendant starts separating the infected passengers from the uninfected ones, placing them in different sections of the cabin. Sumin, whose skin starts blistering, is moved to the back of the plane. Meanwhile, Detective In-ho visits the Bricom headquarters, but is denied entry due to a lack of evidence linking the company to the virus. On the plane, the co-pilot prepares to land in Hawaii, but the Hawaiian authorities refuse to allow the plane to land due to concerns about the virus spreading. With no other choice, the plane heads back to Korea, despite its dwindling fuel. The passengers are upset, as many of them were headed to Hawaii for vacations or work, and now their plans are ruined. In Korea, public fear grows, with many citizens worried that the plane will bring the virus back into the country. Protests break out, demanding that the plane not be allowed to land. The Minister of Transport then decides to bring the plane back to Korea. Meanwhile, Detective In-ho receives a phone call and learns that someone has been helping Ryu carry out his plan. Upon hearing this, Detective In-ho rushes to his apartment, only to find that the person has fled. A chase ensues, but the detective gets into an accident, causing him to fall. Seeing this, the fleeing individual decides to return and save the detective. In the ambulance, the man confesses that he was tricked by Ryu, who had previously researched a highly contagious and dangerous mutant virus called SC-1. As a result of this, Ryu's friends contracted the virus one by one, and only Ryu remained healthy. Because of this, Ryu was fired and accused of exposing the virus to the public, infecting his friends. Ryu wanted the virus to be researched in hopes of restoring his reputation and returning to work at the pharmaceutical company. After hearing this, Detective In-ho visits Ryu's infected friends, but suddenly receives a call informing him that a vaccine for the virus has been found. Back on the plane, the co-pilot becomes infected and asks his friend, Jae-hyuk, to take over, as he can no longer bear the pain. It is revealed why the co-pilot resents Jae-hyuk. Years ago, during an emergency landing, his wife, who was a flight attendant, died when the plane's engine exploded, and Jae-hyuk was the pilot at the time. In the passenger cabin, a terrified man starts pushing away infected passengers in a desperate attempt to save himself. Meanwhile, the Minister of Transport forces the pharmaceutical company to provide the vaccine, threatening to shut them down, as the virus was a result of their work. The company finally agrees to distribute the vaccine for free. Upon hearing this, the passengers rejoice, realizing that they may survive thanks to the vaccine. Meanwhile, the co-pilot begins coughing up blood and decides to land in Japan as he can no longer pilot the plane, and the fuel is running low. He plans to refuel in Japan. The Korean government requests permission from Japan for the plane to land, but Japan refuses, fearing the spread of the virus. Nevertheless, the co-pilot insists on landing. In response, Japan sends fighter jets to shoot down the virus-laden plane. The passengers panic as they hear and see the jets firing at the plane, but the co-pilot remains determined to land in Japan. As they approach landing, one of the Japanese jets suddenly tries to collide with the plane. To avoid a crash, the co-pilot veers off course and heads back toward Korea. Suddenly, the co-pilot passes out, and the plane begins to spiral out of control. Jae-hyuk, sitting next to him, steps in and takes control of the plane. The Japanese government apologizes to the Korean government, fearing the risk posed by the virus. Hearing this, the passengers believe that the vaccine may not have been found, because if it had, Japan would have allowed the plane to land. This leads the Korean government and the public to question whether the vaccine is truly effective. The public even holds an online vote, with the majority agreeing that the Korean plane should not be allowed to land, fearing the virus's spread. Detective In-ho, however, refuses to accept this, as his wife is on the plane. In a desperate attempt to prove the vaccine's effectiveness and save his wife, he injects himself with the virus to test the vaccine. As the plane nears Korea, the South Korean Air Force sends 2 fighter jets to intercept it. The passengers, saddened by the rejection from their own country, decide not to land, preferring to die on the plane rather than risk infecting their loved ones. Seeing the passengers resolve, Jae-hyuk also decides not to land and cuts off all communication with the authorities. The passengers begin recording farewell messages to their families, expressing love and forgiveness despite their grim situation. Just as Jae-hyuk cuts the communication, it is revealed that the vaccine given to Detective In-ho as a test has started to work. The authorities try to contact Jae-hyuk to inform him, but they cannot reach him because he severed the connection. Desperate, the authorities ask 3 of the passengers' families to spread the word that the vaccine has been found. This news brings joy to the passengers, and Jae-hyuk is relieved to hear that the vaccine has worked. He prepares to land the plane, but another issue arises. There is almost no fuel left, and the plane is still far from Seoul. He's forced to land at a closer airport, Songmu Airport, but the weather there is terrible, with strong winds. Knowing that landing at Songmu would risk the plane crashing due to the runway's short length and the unpredictable winds, Jae-hyuk turns off the plane's engines to conserve fuel. He circles the airport several times to slow the plane's speed. After flying in circles for a while, Jae-hyuk attempts to land the plane at high speed. Despite the turbulence caused by the strong winds, Jae-hyuk's skill allows him to successfully land the plane, saving all the passengers except those who had already succumbed to the virus. After some time, the passengers gather for a meeting and meal together, where Detective In-ho, not fully recovered due to the large dose of the vaccine he received, also attends. And with that, the film ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, because by subscribing you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.